This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Alpha Natural Resources, an energy company dedicated to respecting the land. Alpha Natural Resources, we power the world through the energy of our people. Haley Buick GMC, the place for a new Verano or Terrain Denali, in Richmond and online at haleybuickgmc.com. Everywhere there are lighting poles, there's one more opportunity to save money. Intelligent Illuminations provides cost-effective wireless lighting solutions for roadway or area outdoor lights. Kanawha Valley Arena, Virginia's cowboy town, hosts an array of events from Civil War reenactments to diesel truck pulls. More information online at virginiarodeo.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and welcome back to Sam Nixon, the Honorable Sam Nixon, former member of the House of Delegates, appointed by Governor McDonnell as the Chief Information Officer for the Commonwealth of Virginia, plus an agency head. We were talking before miking up, you're kind of wearing, in a sense, two hats. The agency head for VITA, the Virginia Information Technologies area. So we appreciate your being on. We were talking briefly about the fact that folks in the Richmond area perhaps have recently seen an article about VITA. So we're not going to go over the article, but we would just like for you to tell our viewers what's happening in this agency. It's had a lot of heat, and Governor McDonnell appointed you to that position to get everything straightened out.
Well, thanks, David. Great being back. It has been a while since I've been here in the Capitol studio, so it's great to be with you. And as you know, VITA and I have sort of a storied history. Previously, as my role as a legislator, now as a working for Governor McDonnell. And it's hard to believe it's been 10 years since the legislation was first passed. And of course, that happened during the administration of then Governor Warner. And the vision was to bring a more disciplined approach to the management of information technology across the enterprise of state government. And so we've endeavored to do that over a long period of time. And I'm very pleased to be able to say that the vision that we had 10 years ago, because agencies basically at that time ran their IT separate and apart from each other, very siloed. There were no IT standards, almost no monitoring of security. There was no systematic patching of systems to keep them up to date. There was no unified network. There were dozens of different email systems that didn't operate or talk to each other. So almost all of that has changed. You move the clock forward, and today we're about 96% transformed. So I always like to say the agencies are now operating under this standard, reliable, secure network, knowing that it operates 24 hours a day. There are 120-some thousand different physical assets that are part of that network that VITA and our technology partners are responsible for. So it's been an interesting 3 or so years as CIO, and pretty pleased for the most part. We're hitting our marks. We have a lot of work left, but that's sort of the state of IT in the Commonwealth as of this moment.
Now, when you're talking about 100 and some thousand, is that like computers or what is it out there?
It's almost everything you can think of that's involved with a large enterprise IT environment. So I'll just run down a couple of those.
Okay.
Just a couple of those things.
Thank you.
It's one of the things I didn't know until after I became Chief Information Officer is that there are over 2,000 physical sites in the Commonwealth where there is at least one piece of a computer equipment that we are responsible for supporting and maintaining. Of course, we do that primarily through the outsourcing contract with Northrop Grumman. And so 89 agencies, there are nearly 59,000 desktops, 2,247 sites around the state, over 2,000 circuits. So to answer your question, it's all the infrastructure required to support that. All of the desktops, all of the printers, all of the routers, all the firewalls, 2 data centers. There are roughly 3,600 individual file servers, large enterprise storage systems, large disk drives that are in the state data centers, 2 data centers. There's a primary center in Chester. There's a secondary center, a disaster recovery site as we call it, that's located in Lebanon, Virginia. The state's first ever statewide help desk is also in Lebanon. So it's all of the equipment, physical assets that are required to make all of that work. That's where that number comes from.
Well, was part of the idea and part of what's in practice to make the systems more secure? I mean, there's so much concern out there that individuals have and that corporations have, and I imagine that state entities have too, and government entities, about systems being as secure as possible from someone getting into them.
That is a topic that requires constant diligence, and it's something that I probably have at least one meeting or discussion every single day, including nights and weekends, about IT security. And so one of the large objectives for the creation of this unified network was to do a better job of protecting citizen data and the state network from unauthorized access. And that is a tremendous responsibility that we have in conjunction with the agencies. It's actually a shared responsibility. VITA nor the CIO do that alone. We don't do that in a vacuum. So we do work very closely with the agencies. But today, we believe that Virginia is the only state in the entire country who has a unified infrastructure that's monitored 24 hours a day for outside attacks. And so in 2012 alone, there were 121 million blocked attacks on the state network.
100 million?
121 million just in 2012 alone, and 681 million blocked spam emails just in 2012. And so we monitor those environments. Of course, they aren't attacking us because they aren't sometimes successful. Sometimes they are. Malware does get through, does get installed on computers. We have to mitigate those risks on an ongoing basis. And we also are talking to federal authorities, Homeland Security and others, certainly coordinating with state police, emergency management, Secretary Suit's office, depending on what the circumstances are. So that, to answer your basic question, yes, that occupies a lot of our focus and energy. IT security was one of the 8 major responsibilities that the CIO has in the Commonwealth.
And going back 10 years and then over the time period, was another one of the ideas that this would also be a savings to the Commonwealth rather than each agency doing their own thing, procuring and working out?
It was, but here's what we have found is that when you look at the actual dollars being spent then compared to now, we're spending more on IT today than we were before. What we do believe is that when you look back at sort of where the state was in terms of its IT maturity, if you will, we were pretty far behind. So there were thousands of desktops that were out of date. There were networks out of date. There was very few, not very good compliance around software licensing, things like that. And so it cost money to upgrade that. But basically what Northrop Grumman did, and not to give you a Northrop Grumman commercial, but when they came in, they offered to provide a baseline of services at a fixed cost over the life of that contract. So we're spending more today than we were before. We think we've had some cost avoidance as a result of that. We think the network's more reliable, more secure. But have we saved money? Can we show where we've got money today we didn't before? No, we can't say that because it wouldn't be true. But we're also doing things that we could not have dreamed of doing 10 years ago. So it's important that those are important things to recognize going forward.
You know, with the security that's there, and like you say, upgrading, the term that I would use, kind
Right.
of, all the upgrading that taking place, then I guess it baffles some, and even the headlines that somebody put on the Times-Dispatch article that almost implies that in 2019, when the contract expires, that's it. I mean, so why would legislators, your former one, and members of the executive branch, why would they think of ending something? And I'm sure that decision still is out there some in the future.
I think I've tried to be very sensitive to the fact that any future decisions around the provision of IT services is going to require a lot of legislative input. It would be a mistake, I think, for me as CIO or the Secretary of Technology or even the governor to make those decisions unilaterally. Obviously, the legislature wants to feel comfortable at the very least that
Yes.
that we're not doing anything that they would be unhappy with. So it's very important that what we do is provide as much runway, as much forward look as we can in terms of what's the structure of the contract today, what are some newer ways of provisioning IT services in the among government and also in industry, and working back from the end date of the contract, what things need to be in place when. So one of the big decisions is, do you continue outsourcing of some sort? I don't think there's any question we're going to continue to have a unified infrastructure. It's probably unlikely that the state government would want to or even have the means to capitalize or recapitalize that investment. You'd probably have some type of ongoing outsourcing. There's a lot of outsourcing that already occurs. For example, the underlying data networks are not owned by the state; those are outsourced to private industry, and that pattern is repeated many different times in many different ways. So it's an enormous undertaking. So what we're asking in the right way is, what is the big policy decision or direction that the legislature and the governor wants to take? We have our own opinions about that. We obviously have an obligation to share those, and let's sort of all be on the same path as we go down this situation together.
So clearly, that's the next executive branch would be involved, but would it be the next one or the one after the next? Do you see that?
Well, it would be the one after next,
Yeah.
but the way I've described it to the legislative leaders and the money committees particularly is that we sort of see it as a four-step process.
Right.
We're in the preparation phase now, then we'll begin planning next year after that, then probably a procurement phase, and then a migration or a transition. And of course, lots of more unknowns the further ahead you
Sure.
look. So we're in the preparing stage today. We're beginning to kick the tires, looking at what other states have done. Again, no state has done as much consolidation as Virginia has, that involves as many agencies across the breadth of executive branch. And when we first signed the contract with Northrop Grumman, we had a very bricks and mortar view of IT. Today, it's been shaped considerably by the advent of cloud computing, virtualization, those types of things has caused us to think, okay, what's the right model moving forward? We want more flexibility, more agility. We want the ability to take advantage of new advances in technology. We want to be more innovative, quicker, sooner than I think we have been so far. Even though I think we've been pretty darn innovative, we want to do an even better job.
Sam Nixon, Chief Information Officer of the Commonwealth, thank you so much for all those explanations and for being on This Week in Richmond.
Thank you, David. Great to be here.
We'd like to welcome Delegate Onzlee Ware to This Week in Richmond. You've been with us at times in Roanoke, and now we're here at the Capitol in Richmond. Eager to have you talk to the constituents back home and around the state about the session that has ended now, and any comments you have on it, and then anything about the upcoming session too. We'll be glad to hear from you.
Great. I appreciate you having me again, David. I always enjoy doing your show. This session was very exciting for me. It was my 10th year. I've been down in Richmond now 5 terms, and I had the opportunity to become a conferee on the historic transportation bill. But I think what people get lost because the bill passed, but they need to understand the origin of it. As they know, for my 10 years at least, we've been trying gimmicks and games to fix transportation. And then finally this year, I guess I'll give credit to the governor and most of all Speaker Howe. He allowed a bill to come to the floor and a bill to get out. But that bill would have never passed the House of Delegates but for 4 votes on the Democratic side. And I was one of them, but I give credit to Delegate Rosalind Dance, Delegate Ross Tyler, and Delegate Luke Torian. If you look at the numbers, it came out of the House the first time that this was the governor's bill, 54 votes. So if you take those 4 away, the bill wouldn't have passed. So I praise them because they understood that it was important to be statesmanlike rather than dealing with the party. So the bill moved forward. And as you can tell, we put it in conference. I was fortunate to be a conferee, and I can tell you I learned so much about negotiation, which I already thought I knew being an attorney, but we did a good job, and I think we got out a reasonable, sustainable method of funding transportation for, the governor says, generations to come. I don't know if we'll go that far, but at least we'll be able to have some maintenance money and some new construction money. So that was a big plus.
And you know, when the governor had that ceremonial signing of the bill, he singled you out as one of the ones who spoke, and he said you got a train. So for Roanoke, there was some money for.
It turned out well. There was some money to extend the rail ties down so we could have passenger rail from Roanoke to Lynchburg, which Southwest Virginia loves. But there also was some mass transit money that we've gotten later that'll help buses. As you know, Roanoke's not rural, but there's a lot of rural areas around. So my comment on we get a train was somewhat joking, but my point was there are times as a leader that you have to think about the whole, not just yourself. And this was a time, this transportation bill, that I felt it was more important that I think about the entire state. Of course, Northern Virginia Tidewater, you know, substantially gets the boom. But I have faith in the process and in government that if we fix those where we should fix it, that's the congestion, that's where the problems, that the next move will address the needs substantially in Southwest Virginia. But yeah, we got a train out of it, so people are happy about that.
When you think back on the session, what else comes to mind?
Well, you know, I begrudgingly, I know every year we come down, we're going to have social issues, which personally, I don't think they should be as significant as we make them as too governing. I mean, I think they get people defocused off of what's really important, and you never really get consensus on them, but it creates an atmosphere of non-civility. And then, so I don't like those issues, but you tolerate them. But transportation for me this year was the biggie, because I always felt that if we didn't do it this year, I couldn't see where we could get a transportation bill out of the House in particular, probably over the next 10 or 15, maybe 20 years. And it wouldn't matter who the next governor would be. I just felt whether it be Mr. McAuliffe or Mr. Cuccinelli, I don't think that there would have been the political appetite to challenge that bill. The governor also put some school reform initiatives forward. And some people don't like them and some people do, but my emphasis, being on the education committee, is that we need to do whatever's necessary to guarantee that our children get well educated, but most of all, graduate from high school. So I don't take it as a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. It's a people issue. And if we don't do a better job of training our workforce, we're going to have problems in the future. So education and transportation were the things that I sort of focused on this year.
You know, one of the other issues I'll mention to you and get your take on it was the question of expanding Medicaid coverage, and that's still kind of a live issue.
The theory I agree with 100%. I mean, I've always been a believer that, you know, as a Western country, that we ought to have affordable health care for as many people as we can. Now, getting the nuts and bolts properly in order is another issue. And so we move forward with the expansion, but at the same time, we're working on trying to better organize the existing Medicaid plan. And I think that was part of the compromise, even as it flowed over into transportation. So at least we're getting something going. We don't know the answers to all of those issues because of Obamacare and other things that are intricate to making this decision on expansion, but we're moving forward, and I'm pleased with that.
Among the committees that you serve on is that powerful committee of appropriations, and that gets you down here to Richmond about once a month throughout the time that you're not in session.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of people don't understand is that although they think we're just down here for session, the longer you stay and if you are seen as a leader or somebody that's reasonable, the speaker puts you on other committees. I'm on appropriations committee, as you mentioned, meets once a month. I think we meet 9 times out of the year. That's when we're out of session. And then I'm also on the crime commission, who also meets 7 or 8 times a month. So I've calculated I'm in Richmond at least on legislative business when I'm out of session at least 2 to 3 times a month. So it keeps you busy, and that's the part that the citizens don't see. They pay close attention when we're down here casting votes, and as well they should, but it's more to the job than people understand or recognize.
Yeah, we try to encourage constituents to be in contact with their legislators when you're back in the district, because that's when you have some time to be able to talk with them about their issues.
Well, there again, it's like, you know, that I know it started as a citizen legislature,
Right.
but I'm an attorney by profession, and I probably spend at least as much time on legislative matters in my district as I do my law practice, which should be the other way. But unfortunately, being from Roanoke, and I live in the center of my district, I see people at the grocery store, I see people at the Family Dollar, I see people when I go out to eat. And so every day that I walk out my front door, I become a legislator. And so I think I have a responsibility to those folk to understand and listen to their concerns.
When you look ahead to the next session, are there already some issues that you think that are going to be bills that you'll be putting in, something that you've been working on?
Well, you know, I'm not a bill-driven delegate, as we
Correct.
just finished talking. I spent a lot of time on appropriations and the crime commission. I'm sure I usually carry 4 or 5 bills from my locality. My city council usually have some bills or some concerns, so I'll carry those. And then I don't just walk around looking for bills.
Right,
If a constituent brings something to me that I think is laudable, you know, I'll carry it. I tell people all the time, what people are more interested in when we come down here, in my opinion, is how can we put more money in their pockets so that they can feed their family? How can we better educate their kids, and how can we keep them safe? I just think those are the critical issues that as a legislator I need to pay attention to.
You know, it's been a while since I've had a conversation with someone about the crime commission, so take our closing minute or so and tell folks what happens in those crime commission meetings.
Well, what happens in crime commissions, a lot of times bills are filed during session and we can't get a consensus on them, so they sort of refer them to the crime commission for further study. Now, Christian Howard is the director. They do a marvelous job, and they can dissect any bill. They don't tell us how to vote or deal with the bill, but they'll dissect it. And if we, as a committee, agree that this is something that ought to go before the House, we'll individually sponsor or patron those bills, and then we'll put it before the full House, and it's either up or down. But it sort of streamlines a lot of good ideas and sort of get rid of some ideas that aren't quite ready for prime time yet. So.
You know, that's very helpful because people don't sometimes understand that bills do go through a process that way.
Well, they absolutely should. As you know, no matter how many bills are filed since I've been down here 10 years, about 1/3 of them actually make it to the floor and become legislation.
Delegate Onzlee Ware, thank you so much for talking with our viewers and being on This Week in
I
Richmond.
appreciate you, David. Thank you.
Thank you.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Alpha Natural Resources, an energy company dedicated to respecting the land. Alpha Natural Resources, we power the world through the energy of our people. Haley Buick GMC, the place for a new Verano or Terrain Denali, in Richmond and online at haleybuickgmc.com. Everywhere there are lighting poles, there's one more opportunity to save money. Intelligent Illuminations provides cost-effective wireless lighting solutions for roadway or area outdoor lights. Kanawha Valley Arena, Virginia's cowboy town, hosts an array of events from Civil War reenactments to diesel truck pulls. More information online at virginiarodeo.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.